The whispers followed Zara Clayton through the dusty streets of North Platte, Nebraska, like persistent shadows, each one cutting deeper than the last. It was the spring of 1876, and at 24 years old, she had already been branded with the cruelest label a frontier woman could bear: Barren. Zara kept her chin high as she walked toward Caldwell's general store, the morning sun warming her face while the townspeople's cold stares chilled her spirit. 3 years of marriage to Thomas Clayton had produced no children, and when he died suddenly from typhoid last winter, the whispers only grew louder. A woman without a husband or children had little place in a growing frontier town. "Morning, Mrs. Clayton," Mr. Caldwell said with forced politeness as the bell above his door announced her arrival. "Good morning," Zara replied, placing her basket on the counter. "I need flour, sugar, and some coffee if you have it." Mr. Caldwell nodded, moving with deliberate slowness as he gathered her items. The store had fallen quiet upon her entrance, other customers suddenly finding great interest in examining merchandise. "That'll be 85 cents, he said, placing the items before her. Zara counted out the coins from her dwindling savings. "Thank you, Mrs. Clayton," he said, lowering his voice. "I don't mean to pry, but there's been talk about the mortgage on your place." Her spine stiffened. "What about it?" "Well, folks are wondering how a widow means to keep up payments. The bank's not known for patience. My husband left me that homestead, Mr. Caldwell. I aim to keep it. No offense meant, madam, just that farming ain't exactly women's work, especially for one who—" He hesitated, but the implication hung in the air between them. One who couldn't even fulfill her duty as a wife, they meant. One who was barren. "I'll manage," she said curtly, gathering her purchases. As she turned to leave, she nearly collided with Martha Simmons, whose pregnant belly preceded her through the doorway. Martha, who had already given her husband 4 children, stepped back with a look of distaste. "Excuse me," Zara murmured, moving past her. "Did you hear?" Martha said loudly to no one in particular. "The bank's already talking about who'll take over the Clayton place once it's foreclosed." "My Herbert says that land's too good to be wasted on." The door closed behind Zara, cutting off Martha's words but not the sting they carried. The walk home stretched before her, a mile beyond the edge of town to the small homestead Thomas had been so proud of. They had arrived in North Platte, full of dreams, 3 years ago when the Union Pacific made the town an important stop. Thomas had worked the land while Zara kept house and waited, month after month, for the blessing of a child that never came. The doctor had examined her after the 2nd year, his verdict delivered with clinical detachment. "Some women just aren't made for bearing children, Mrs. Clayton." The memory made her steps falter, but she pressed on. The Nebraska prairie stretched vast around her, the tall grass rippling in the breeze. In the distance, she could see the smoke from her chimney. Rosa must have kept the fire going. Rosa Longfeather was the only true friend Zara had in North Platte, an Omaha woman who had married a white trapper before he too passed away. Now she lived on the outskirts of town, facing her own brand of scorn. As Zara approached her homestead, she could see a figure on horseback near her barn. Alarm quickened her step until she recognized the tall, lean form of Wade Garrison, the rancher who owned the neighboring property. She had seen him around town occasionally, but had never spoken more than a few words to him. "Mrs. Clayton," he called, touching the brim of his hat as she approached. "Mr. Garrison, what brings you to my property?" He dismounted with easy grace, his movements fluid despite his tall frame. Up close, she could see the lines etched around his eyes from squinting into the sun, placing him in his early 30s. His light brown hair curled slightly beneath his hat, and a neatly trimmed beard framed a jawline that spoke of stubbornness. I was riding fence and noticed your north pasture gate was down, he explained. Went ahead and fixed it for you. Zara blinked in surprise. That's very kind, but I could have managed. A slight smile touched his lips. No doubt, madam, but being neighborly doesn't cost a thing. She wasn't used to kindness without ulterior motives. Well, thank you. Would you care for some coffee? Another time, perhaps. I've got cattle to move. He glanced around the property, his gaze assessing. Your corn should be planted soon if you aim to get a crop this year. I'm aware, she said, a defensive edge creeping into her voice. He studied her face for a moment. I didn't mean any offense, Mrs. Clayton, just an observation. Everyone in town seems full of observations lately, she replied. Wade nodded slowly. Small towns run on gossip like engines run on coal. Doesn't make it worth listening to. Before she could respond, Rosa emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. Zara, the bread is ready. She nodded politely to Wade. Mr. Garrison. Miss Longfeather, he replied with the same respect he'd shown Zara, something rarely afforded to Rosa in town. I should be going, he said, mounting his horse with one fluid motion. If you need help with that planting, Mrs. Clayton, send word. I've got a couple of hands who could spare a day. That won't be necessary, Zara said quickly, but thank you for the offer. He tipped his hat again, a gesture oddly formal against the backdrop of her humble homestead. Good day, ladies. As he rode away, Rosa came to stand beside Zara. That man has kind eyes. He has land that borders mine, Zara replied. Probably just making sure I don't let things fall to ruin and affect his property values. Rosa made a soft, clicking sound with her tongue. Not everyone has hidden motives, my friend. In my experience, most do. Zara turned toward the house. Come on, let's have some of that bread while it's hot. Inside the simple two-room cabin, Zara placed her purchases on the table. The home she and Thomas had built was modest but solid, with a main room for cooking and living and a small bedroom. The furniture was sparse: a table with 4 chairs, a small settee by the fireplace, a bookshelf with the few books they'd brought west. Rosa cut thick slices of fresh bread, the aroma filling the small space. I finished washing the linens and weeded the vegetable garden. You don't need to do so much, Zara said, though she was grateful. Rosa came by 3 times a week to help, refusing payment beyond a share of whatever the garden produced. And who else will help you show this town they are wrong about you? Rosa asked pointedly. Besides, my hands need work to stay happy. Zara sank into a chair. The bank's making noise about the mortgage. How much do you owe? $80 by the end of summer, or they'll start foreclosure proceedings. Rosa's dark eyes narrowed. And how much do you have? $23.40, Zara admitted. If I sell some of Thomas's tools and my mother's silver, maybe I could get another 15. Still not enough. Rosa sat across from her. What about the land? Could you sell a piece? Zara shook her head. The whole parcel is mortgaged. I can't sell any part without paying off the bank first. They ate in contemplative silence until Rosa spoke again. You could marry. There are men who know, Zara said firmly. I won't marry out of desperation, even to save your home, especially not for that. Zara stared out the window at the land that represented everything she and Thomas had dreamed of. Besides, who would want a wife known to be barren? My only value as a woman in their eyes is gone. That is their foolishness, not your truth, Rosa said sharply. A woman's worth isn't measured by her womb. Zara gave her friend a sad smile. Try telling that to North Platte. The next morning dawned clear and warm. Zara dressed in Thomas's old work clothes, her auburn hair braided and tucked under a wide-brimmed hat. If she was going to save her farm, she needed to plant that corn, neighbors' opinions be damned. She had just begun hitching the plow to her aging horse when the sound of approaching riders made her turn. Wade Garrison rode toward her, flanked by two younger men. "Mrs. Clayton," he called in greeting. "Mr. Garrison," she replied cautiously. "What brings you here?" He dismounted, his expression unreadable. "I mentioned helping with your planting. These are my hands, Liam and Hank." The men nodded respectfully, hats in hands. "I told you that wasn't necessary," she said. Wade gestured to her poorly hitched plow. "With respect, madam, it looks quite necessary." Her cheeks burned with embarrassment. "I can learn." "No doubt," he agreed easily, "but farming's got a narrow window for planting. Learning might cost you this year's crop." She wanted to refuse, to prove she could manage alone, but practicality won out. "And what would this help cost me, Mr. Garrison?" Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, or respect for her directness. "Nothing, Mrs. Clayton. As I said, being neighborly costs nothing. People don't help for nothing around here. Perhaps you've been dealing with the wrong people." He nodded to his men, who began unloading tools from their horses. "We'll have your north field planted by sundown." True to his word, Wade and his men worked tirelessly through the day. Zara worked alongside them, refusing to be a passive observer on her own land. By late afternoon, sweat soaked through her shirt and her muscles screamed with fatigue, but rows of freshly planted corn stretched before her. Wade approached, offering a canteen of water. "You work hard, Mrs. Clayton." She accepted the water, drinking deeply before responding. "It's my land, my responsibility." "Admirable," he said, taking back the canteen, "but everyone needs help sometimes." "Why are you really helping me, Mr. Garrison?" she asked bluntly. "And please don't say neighborliness again." A smile creased his weathered face. "Straight talking, aren't you? Fine. I admire grit, Mrs. Clayton. When most widows would be searching for a new husband or moving back east, you're out here fighting for what's yours. And that's worth a day's labor from you and your men." "That," he said, "and I know what it's like when a town decides who you are without bothering to learn the truth." Before she could ask what he meant, Liam called him over to check something with the seed spacing. The moment for questions passed, but Zara found herself watching Wade Garrison with new curiosity. As promised, they finished by sundown. Zara insisted they stay for supper, the least she could do in return. She served a simple meal of beans, cornbread, and the last of her preserved peaches. "This is mighty fine cooking, Mrs. Clayton," Hank said between enthusiastic bites. "Thank you," she replied, unused to compliments after months of isolation. Wade ate more modestly but with evident appreciation. "How long have you been in North Platte?" "3 years. Thomas, my husband, brought us here when the railroad was expanding. He believed the town would grow and land would become valuable." "He wasn't wrong," Wade said, "though the cattle industry's proving more profitable than farming in these parts." "You raise cattle then?" He nodded. "Started with 20 head 5 years ago, up to about 300 now." "That's impressive," Zara said, genuinely surprised. Such growth represented significant success. "Just fortunate timing and hard work," he replied, though the casual way he dismissed his achievements suggested a man uncomfortable with praise. After the meal, the hands excused themselves to tend to the horses, leaving Zara and Wade alone at the table. "I can't thank you enough for today," she said. "No thanks needed." He hesitated, then added, "Mrs. Clayton, I couldn't help overhearing talk in town about the mortgage." Zara stiffened. "The bank's concerns are between me and them." "Of course," he said quickly. "I just wanted to say, if you're considering options, I could use someone with cooking skills like yours at my ranch. I've got 6 hands living in the bunkhouse, and none of them can make beans taste like anything but dirt." "You're offering me a job as a cook?" Good pay, your own cabin on the property, he continued. And you'd be free to keep working your land on the side if you wanted. The offer was unexpected and surprisingly tempting. With steady income, she might be able to save the farm. But the thought of leaving, of admitting defeat to the town. "I'll think about it," she said finally. Wade nodded and stood. "That's all I ask." He reached for his hat. "Thank you for the meal, Mrs. Clayton." "Zara," she said impulsively. "My name is Zara." A smile warmed his eyes. "Zara. That's pretty." "Good night, then, Zara." "Good night, Wade." After he left, Zara sat alone at the table, turning his offer over in her mind. The thought of working for wages didn't trouble her. She'd done so before meeting Thomas, teaching at a small school back east. What troubled her was what the town would say, that she'd failed, just as they'd expected. But as she blew out the lamp and prepared for bed, another thought surfaced. Perhaps what mattered wasn't what North Platte thought of her, but what she thought of herself. The next week passed in a blur of activity. With the corn planted, Zara turned her attention to the vegetable garden, expanding it in hopes of having excess to sell. She also took inventory of everything she owned that might fetch a price: Thomas's pocket watch, her mother's silver teapot, a fine quilt she'd made for their wedding. She was hanging laundry when Sheriff Dawson rode up, his expression grim beneath his mustache. "Mrs. Clayton," he called, dismounting stiffly. The sheriff was in his 50s with a paunch that spoke of too many meals at the town's cafe. "Sheriff," she replied, wiping her hands on her apron. "What brings you out this way? Bank asked me to deliver this." He held out an official-looking envelope. "Notice about your mortgage situation." Zara took it with steady hands, though her heart raced. They couldn't mail it. Mr. Hoffman thought a personal delivery might emphasize the seriousness of the matter. The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. "For what it's worth, I think it's a shame." Thomas was a good man. "Yes, he was," she agreed, seeing no point in opening the envelope while he watched. They both knew what it contained, a formal deadline after which the bank would foreclose. "Well, I'll be going then," he said, returning to his horse. "Good day, Mrs. Clayton." Once he was gone, Zara opened the letter. The bank demanded full payment of the remaining mortgage, $80 by August 1st, less than 3 months away. If she failed to pay, the property would be auctioned on August 15th. She sat heavily on the porch steps, the paper trembling in her hands. Even if she sold everything of value, even if the garden produced abundantly, she wouldn't have enough in time. Rosa found her there an hour later, still clutching the notice. "What is it?" her friend asked, sitting beside her. Zara handed over the letter wordlessly. "August 1st, Rosa read. "That is not much time." "It's impossible," Zara said flatly. "I can't make that much money so quickly." Rosa was quiet for a moment. "What about Mr. Garrison's offer?" Zara looked up in surprise. "How did you know about that?" "This is a small place, Zara. His hands talk in town, and people talk to me when they want remedies for their ailments." "Would you take it? Work for someone else to save your home?" Rosa shrugged. "I would do what needs doing. Pride makes a cold companion in winter." That evening, Zara walked the boundaries of her property, remembering how Thomas had strode across it that first day, pointing out where they'd build, where they'd plant, where their children would play someday. The children who never came. By the time she returned to the house, her decision was made. The following morning, she rode to the Garrison Ranch, a substantial spread about 3 miles from her homestead. The main house was impressive by frontier standards, 2 stories with a wide porch and glass windows. Behind it stood a bunkhouse, barn, and several outbuildings, including a small cabin that must be the one Wade had mentioned. A young man spotted her approaching and called out, "Boss, visitor." Wade emerged from the barn, recognition lighting his face when he saw her. "Mrs. Clayton." "This is a surprise. I've been thinking about your offer," she said without preamble. He nodded. "Would you like to come inside to discuss it?" The interior of the main house was simply but comfortably furnished. Wade led her to a study where ledgers and maps covered a large desk. "Please sit," he offered, taking a seat across from her. "Can I offer you something to drink?" "No, thank you." Zara straightened her spine. "I'd like to accept your job offer with conditions." His eyebrows rose slightly. "I'm listening." "I'll cook for you and your men, but I need advances on my wages. The bank has given me until August 1st to pay $80 or they'll foreclose." Wade leaned back in his chair. "That's a substantial advance." "I know," she acknowledged, "but I'll work it off. And I'll need time each day to tend my own place." He considered her for a long moment. "I can advance you $50 now. The rest you'll earn by August with time built in for your homestead." Relief flooded through her. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," he said with a wry smile. "Wait until you've met the appetites you'll be cooking for." They settled on terms. She would prepare 3 meals daily for Wade and his ranch hands, with Sundays off. She would live in the small cabin on his property, but could visit her homestead daily to maintain it. Her wages would be generous enough that, combined with the advance, she could pay the bank by the deadline. "When can you start?" he asked. "Tomorrow," she decided. "I'll need today to pack and prepare my house." As she rose to leave, Wade said, "One more thing, Mrs. Clayton." "Zara," she corrected him. "If I'm working for you, Zara seems appropriate." "Zara," he agreed. "I want to be clear. This arrangement doesn't give anyone the right to disrespect you. You'll be an employee, not a servant." The distinction touched her. "I appreciate that, Wade." The next morning, Zara moved into the small cabin on the Garrison Ranch. It was simple but clean, with a bedroom, sitting area, and small kitchen of her own. Wade helped carry her trunk of belongings, then showed her to the main house's kitchen where she would prepare the meals. "The men eat in the bunkhouse," he explained. "I usually take meals in the dining room or my study, depending on work." "And what do they like to eat?" she asked, surveying the well-stocked pantry. "Honestly, anything that's not their own cooking. They've been surviving on beans and whatever game they can shoot." He smiled ruefully. "We're not particular, just hungry." That evening, Zara served a simple but hearty meal of beef stew, fresh bread, and apple cobbler. The ranch hand's 6 men of varying ages ate as if they hadn't seen real food in months. "Madam," said Liam, the youngest at barely 20, "this is the finest meal I've had since leaving my mother's table." "Thank you," she replied, pleased despite herself. "It's nothing fancy." "Don't need fancy," said another hand, an older man named Pete. "Just good." Wade ate in the dining room, but when Zara brought him coffee afterward, he was equally appreciative. "I think you've just guaranteed yourself the loyalty of every man on this ranch," he said, eyes crinkling with amusement. "It's just food," she demurred. "Not to men who have been burning everything they cook. To them, you're a miracle worker." For the first time in months, Zara felt a sense of purpose beyond mere survival. It was a strange feeling, almost like contentment. Over the next few weeks, Zara settled into a rhythm. She rose before dawn to bake bread and prepare breakfast, then used the mid-morning hours to ride to her homestead and tend her garden. Back at the ranch by noon, she would cook lunch, then prepare dinner in the late afternoon. The work was hard but satisfying, especially with the grateful recipients of her cooking. She learned about the men, too. Liam was saving money to bring his sweetheart from back east. Pete had lost his wife to cholera and turned to ranch work to escape memories. Hank had dreams of his own spread someday. They treated her with respect, careful not to track mud into her kitchen and always thanking her for meals. Wade remained something of a mystery. He was unfailingly polite but revealed little about himself beyond his daily work. She learned he kept meticulous records, rode out with his men despite his status as owner, and read extensively in the evenings. Sometimes she would bring him coffee and find him poring over a book of poetry or history, so absorbed he barely noticed her presence. One evening in late June, a violent thunderstorm swept across the prairie. Lightning forked across the sky and rain fell in sheets. Zara had just finished cleaning the kitchen when Wade burst through the door, soaked to the skin. "The horses are spooked," he said breathlessly. "Lightning hit near the corral. Need all hands." Without hesitation, Zara grabbed her shawl. "I'll help." Together they ran through the downpour to the corral, where the other men were struggling to calm the panicked horses. One had broken through the fence and was bolting toward the open prairie. "That's Midnight," Wade shouted over the storm. "She's heading for the ravine." Before anyone could stop him, he was on another horse, galloping after the runaway mare. Zara helped the others secure the remaining horses, her clothes plastered to her skin, mud sucking at her boots. Nearly an hour passed before Wade returned, leading the black mare. Both horse and rider were exhausted, Wade's face grim in the lantern light. "She's injured," he said, dismounting stiffly. "Cut her leg on something." Zara stepped forward. "Let me see." Wade looked surprised but led the horse to the stable. By lantern light, Zara examined the deep gash on the mare's hind leg. "I need hot water, clean cloths, and whiskey," she instructed. "And needle and thread if you have it." "You know about treating horses?" Wade asked. "No, but I know about cleaning wounds," she replied. "The principles are the same." He sent Liam for the supplies while Zara soothed the trembling animal. When everything arrived, she cleaned the wound carefully, then stitched it with steady hands. "Where did you learn to do that?" Wade asked as she finished. "My father was a doctor," she explained, bandaging the leg. "I assisted him sometimes." "You're full of surprises, Zara Clayton." The intimacy of the moment standing close in the lantern-lit stable, both soaked and mud splattered, suddenly struck her. She stepped back, clearing her throat. She should heal well, but watch for signs of infection. Later, changed into dry clothes and warmed by the fire in her cabin, Zara reflected on the night's events. She had acted without thinking, falling back on knowledge she'd almost forgotten she possessed. And Wade had looked at her with something beyond gratitude, with admiration. The next morning, she found a book on her kitchen table, Gray's Anatomy, a medical text she recognized from her father's library. Inside was a note in Wade's neat handwriting. "Thought you might enjoy this. Thank you for saving Midnight." The gesture touched her deeply. It wasn't just the book, but the recognition of a part of herself she had pushed aside in her years of marriage, her interest in medicine, inherited from her father but discouraged by Thomas, who believed wives should focus on home and family. When she brought Wade his morning coffee, she thanked him. "It's nothing," he said, looking slightly embarrassed. "Just thought it might interest you." "It does," she admitted. "Very much." "Your father, was he a doctor here in Nebraska?" Zara shook her head. "Back in Pennsylvania. He died before Thomas and I came west." "And your mother?" "Gone since I was 16. Consumption." Wade nodded thoughtfully. "So you came west with just your husband?" "Yes," she said. "Thomas had grand plans for us, a farm, a family." Her voice faltered. "I'm sorry," Wade said softly. "For your loss." The simple sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. Unlike the practiced condolences of the townspeople, his felt genuine. "Thank you," she replied. "What about your family?" A shadow crossed his face. "None to speak of. My parents died when I was young. Raised by an uncle who wasn't particularly interested in the job." "Is that why you came west?" "Partly," he acknowledged. "Mostly I wanted something that was mine, something I built myself." You've succeeded, she observed. This is an impressive operation for just 5 years, he shrugged. Still a lot to do. But yes, I'm proud of it. Their conversation was interrupted by Hank calling from outside, and Wade excused himself to deal with ranch business. But something had shifted between them, a door opened to understanding. As July progressed, bringing relentless heat to the prairie, Zara found herself looking forward to her conversations with Wade. Sometimes he would join her in the kitchen while she baked, discussing books or sharing stories of particularly stubborn cattle. Other times, she would bring him evening coffee and linger, asking about ranch operations or telling him about her garden's progress. One Sunday, her day off, she returned from her homestead to find Wade waiting by her cabin. "I was wondering," he said, hat in hands, "if you might like to ride with me. There's a spot on the north side of the property I thought you might enjoy." Surprised but pleased, she agreed. They rode side by side across the rolling grassland, the summer sun warm on their backs. Wade led her to a small grove of trees surrounding a clear spring, a rarity in the often dry landscape. "It's beautiful," she breathed, dismounting to dip her fingers in the cool water. "I found it my first week here," he said, joining her. "Come here sometimes to think." They sat in the shade, sharing the lunch Zara had packed. The conversation flowed easily between them, touching on childhood memories, books they'd read, dreams they'd harbored. "Did you always want to be a rancher?" she asked. Wade considered this. "No, actually, I wanted to be a lawyer once. Even studied for a year back east. What changed? Found I preferred open spaces to courtrooms," he said. "And honest work with my hands to arguments about property lines. Yet here you are, dealing with property and cattle instead of clients." He laughed, the sound rich and unexpected. "Ironic, isn't it? But cattle are more straightforward than people. They don't hide their intentions. Unlike people in North Platte," she said wryly, his expression sobered. "Has it been very difficult? The town, I mean." Zara looked away, focusing on the rippling spring water. "They decided what I was worth the moment they realized I couldn't have children. A barren woman has little value on the frontier." "That's not true," he said, his voice low and intense. "Isn't it? A woman's purpose here is to populate the territory, to be a helpmate, to raise the next generation." She plucked a blade of grass, shredding it between her fingers. "I failed at the most basic expectation." "You haven't failed at anything," Wade said firmly. "Not being able to have children doesn't diminish your worth, Zara." The sound of her name in his mouth, spoken with such conviction, made her look up. His eyes held hers, unwavering. "The town is wrong," he continued. "About so many things, but especially about you." Something warm unfurled in her chest, a feeling she hadn't experienced in a very long time. Before she could examine it too closely, a distant roll of thunder broke the moment. "Storm coming," Wade said, glancing at the darkening western sky. "We should head back." They rode home in comfortable silence, reaching the ranch just as the first heavy drops began to fall. As Zara dismounted, Wade impulsively reached out to tuck a wind-blown strand of hair behind her ear. "Thank you for riding with me today," he said softly. "Thank you for showing me your thinking place," she replied, equally quiet. They stood for a moment, rain falling around them, something unspoken passing between them. Then Wade stepped back, clearing his throat. "Better get inside before we're soaked." Zara nodded, but as she turned toward her cabin, she felt a curious lightness in her step despite the gathering storm. The next morning, Zara was kneading bread dough when Rosa appeared in the kitchen doorway. "There you are," her friend said. "I went to your homestead first." "Rosa," Zara wiped her hands on her apron and embraced her. "I've missed you, and I you." Rosa looked around the kitchen appreciatively. "So this is where you work now, it suits you." It does, Zara admitted. More than I expected. They talked while Zara continued preparing the day's meals, Rosa helping by peeling potatoes and slicing vegetables. Your garden is doing well, Rosa observed. The corn especially. Thanks to Wade and his men getting it planted in time. Rosa's dark eyes studied her face. You call him Wade now, not Mr. Garrison. Zara felt a flush creeping up her neck. We worked together closely. Formality seemed unnecessary. Rosa hummed noncommittally. And how is it working for him? Good, Zara said simply. He's fair, respectful. The men are kind. And handsome, Rosa added with a sly smile. Your employer. Rosa, what? I have eyes, my friend, so do you. Zara busied herself with the bread dough. It's not like that. He's my employer, as you said. If you say so. Rosa's tone was skeptical. But I see something new in your face, a brightness that wasn't there before. Before Zara could respond, the kitchen door opened and Wade himself appeared. Sorry to interrupt, he said, nodding politely to Rosa. Just wanted to let you know we'll have 2 extra for dinner. Cattle buyers from Omaha. I'll make sure there's plenty, Zara assured him after he left. Rosa raised an eyebrow. Not like that, hum? Oh, hush, Zara muttered, but she couldn't quite suppress a smile. The dinner that evening was a success, with the cattle buyers complimenting the food effusively. Afterward, one of them, a portly man named Jenkins, sought out Zara in the kitchen. Mrs. Clayton, he said, that was the finest meal I've had in Nebraska territory. Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. In fact, he continued, I own a hotel in Omaha that's in desperate need of a cook of your caliber. I'd be willing to offer you a very handsome salary. Zara blinked in surprise. That's very flattering, but think about it, he urged. Omaha's growing fast. A woman of your skills could do very well there, better than out here in the middle of nowhere. She was saved from responding by Wade's arrival. Jenkins, he said cordially, I believe your partner is ready to leave. The buyer nodded. Just extending a job offer to your excellent cook here. Something flickered across Wade's face, too quickly for Zara to interpret. Mrs. Clayton is indispensable to the Double G, he said evenly. We'd be lost without her. Everyone has their price, Garrison, Jenkins replied with a wink before departing. Once he was gone, an awkward silence fell between them. Would you consider it? Wade asked finally. The Omaha position, Zara considered the question. A month ago she might have jumped at such an opportunity. Now the thought of leaving brought an unexpected pang. No, she said simply. I have my homestead to think of, and other considerations. Relief visibly washed over his face. Good, I mean, it's good you're not leaving your land. Yes, she agreed softly, my land. But as she watched him walk away, Zara wondered if it was really her land holding her to North Platte, or someone else entirely. Late July brought a heat wave that baked the prairie into submission. Zara rose even earlier to bake before the kitchen became unbearable, and the men worked shorter days, resting during the worst of the afternoon sun. One particularly stifling evening, Wade invited Zara to join him on the porch after dinner, where a slight breeze offered minimal relief. I received a letter from the bank today, she told him, fanning herself with a folded newspaper. Mr. Hoffman confirms they'll accept my payment on the 1st. That's good news, Wade said. You must be relieved. I am. She gazed out at the golden light stretching across the grassland. I never thought I'd manage it. I never doubted, he replied. You're the most determined woman I've ever met, Zara Clayton, she laughed softly. Is that a compliment or an observation? Definitely a compliment. His eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, she noticed. Determination is an admirable quality. My father used to call it stubbornness, she admitted. A fine line between the two. They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. The approaching evening had done little to dissipate the heat, and Zara could feel perspiration trickling between her shoulder blades. "I've been thinking," Wade said eventually. "After you pay off the bank, what are your plans for the homestead?" "Keep working it," she replied without hesitation. "Grow as much as I can, maybe add some chickens, a milk cow." "Alone?" The question hung in the heavy air between them. Zara studied his profile, strong and thoughtful in the fading light. "I've grown accustomed to managing alone," she said carefully. Wade turned to face her fully. "You shouldn't have to," her heart quickened. "What are you suggesting, Wade?" "I'm not sure," he admitted, running a hand through his hair. "I just know that when Jenkins offered you that job, the thought of you leaving was unbearable." The confession, so plainly stated, took her breath away. "Wade, you don't need to say anything," he said quickly. "I know your focus is your land, as it should be. I just wanted you to know that you've become important to me." Zara found herself reaching for his hand before she could think better of it. His palm was calloused against hers, warm and solid. "You've become important to me too," she said softly. His fingers tightened around hers, and for a moment she thought he might say more. Instead, he lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "Good night, Zara," he murmured. "Good night," she whispered back, her skin tingling where his lips had touched. As she walked back to her cabin in the gathering darkness, Zara acknowledged what she'd been avoiding for weeks. She was falling in love with Wade Garrison. The realization should have frightened her. Wade was her employer. Her livelihood depended on him. More than that, she had sworn after Thomas died that she wouldn't marry again, wouldn't subject another man to life with a barren wife. Yet fear wasn't what she felt as she prepared for bed that night. Instead, a cautious hope took root alongside the certainty that whatever happened next would change everything. The first day of August dawned clear and hot, a momentous day for Zara. With the wages she'd earned and Wade's advance, she had the full $80 needed to satisfy the bank's demands. She dressed with care in her best dress, a dark blue cotton that had once been fashionable back east. Wade had offered to accompany her into town, but she had declined. This was something she needed to do alone to face North Platte on her own terms. The ride into town was familiar now, though she visited rarely. As she passed the "Welcome to North Platte" sign, she straightened her spine, prepared for the inevitable stares and whispers. The bank was a solid brick building on Front Street, imposing despite its small size. Zara tied her horse outside and entered, the small bell above the door announcing her arrival. Mr. Hoffman glanced up from his ledger, his spectacles perched on the end of his nose. "Mrs. Clayton," he said, surprise evident in his voice. "I didn't expect to see you today." "I've come to pay my mortgage, Mr. Hoffman," she replied, approaching the counter. He removed his spectacles, a skeptical expression crossing his face. "The full amount, $80. "The full amount," she confirmed, placing the carefully counted bills on the counter. Hoffman stared at the money, then at her, clearly surprised. "Well, this is unexpected." "I believe you'll find it's exactly what was required," she said evenly. With obvious reluctance, he counted the money, then opened a large ledger. "Everything appears to be in order," he admitted, making notations in the book. "I'll prepare a receipt confirming payment in full." While he wrote, Zara noticed two women watching from across the street through the bank's window. Martha Simmons and Beatrice Fuller, two of the most prolific gossips in North Platte. She lifted her chin slightly, meeting their gaze until they looked away. "Here you are, Mrs. Clayton," Hoffman said, sliding a receipt toward her. "Your debt to the bank is satisfied. The property remains yours." "Thank you." She took the paper, carefully folding it into her reticule. As she turned to leave, Hoffman added, "I must say, Mrs. Clayton, many in town were certain you wouldn't manage it." Zara paused at the door. "Yes, Mr. Hoffman, I'm well aware what many in town think of me. Fortunately, their opinions matter far less than they imagine." With that, she stepped outside into the bright sunshine. A weight lifted from her shoulders. Her homestead was secure. She had done what so many thought impossible. Her next stop was Caldwell's General Store. She needed supplies, and facing Mr. Caldwell after her triumph at the bank held a certain appeal. The store was busier than usual, women gathering around the new shipment of fabric that had arrived on yesterday's train. Conversation halted when Zara entered, eyes turning toward her with undisguised curiosity. "Mrs. Clayton," Mr. Caldwell greeted her from behind the counter. "What can I help you with today?" "Coffee, sugar, and some of that new calico if you have enough," she replied, aware of the whispers starting around her. As Caldwell gathered her items, Martha Simmons approached, her perpetual expression of disapproval firmly in place. "Mrs. Clayton," she said with artificial sweetness, "we heard you were working out at the Garrison Ranch. As a cook, is it?" The implied judgment was clear in her tone. "Yes," Zara replied simply. "Mr. Garrison has been kind enough to employ me." "How charitable of him," Martha said, exchanging glances with Beatrice. "Though I suppose a man living alone must get tired of his own cooking." "6 ranch hands and Mr. Garrison," Zara corrected mildly. "Hardly alone." "Still," Martha pressed, "it must be difficult for you living out there away from town. People might talk." "People always talk, Mrs. Simmons," Zara said, meeting her gaze steadily, "particularly when they have little else to occupy their minds." Beatrice gasped at the thinly veiled insult, but Martha's eyes narrowed. "I was only expressing concern for your reputation. A widow living among so many men, my reputation." Zara interrupted, a calm settling over her that felt like clarity. "You mean the reputation this town decided for me the moment it became clear I couldn't have children. The one that says a barren woman is worthless, regardless of her character or abilities." The store had gone silent, all pretense of shopping abandoned as everyone listened. "Well, I paid my mortgage in full today, Mrs. Simmons. Every cent. My land remains mine, earned through honest work that you may consider beneath you but that I find honorable." Zara gathered her purchases from the stunned Mr. Caldwell. "As for what people say about me, I've learned that the opinions of small-minded people make for very small concerns." With that, she paid for her items and walked out, her heart pounding but her head held high. It wasn't until she was on her horse, heading back to the Double G Ranch, that the magnitude of what she'd done hit her. She had confronted not just Martha Simmons, but the judgment of the entire town, and it had felt wonderful. Wade was in the corral when she returned, working with a young horse. He looked up as she approached, his face breaking into a smile that warmed her to her core. "How did it go?" he called, ducking between the fence rails to meet her. "I paid it," she said, dismounting. "Every cent. The homestead is safe." "That's wonderful." His enthusiasm was genuine, his eyes crinkling with pleasure. "I knew you could do it." "I also may have scandalized half the women in town," she admitted, recounting her encounter with Martha Simmons. By the time she finished, Wade was laughing. "I wish I could have seen Martha's face," he said. "That woman has needed putting in her place for years." "It felt good," Zara confessed. "Standing up for myself." "You should be proud," he said, suddenly serious. "Not just for saving your land, but for showing them all who you really are, strong, independent, remarkable." The sincerity in his voice made her breath catch. Without thinking, she stepped closer, drawn by something in his expression. Wade, she began, not entirely sure what she meant to say. Yes, he prompted, his voice dropping lower. Thank you for believing in me when no one else did. He reached out, his fingers gently brushing her cheek. That was easy, he murmured. Easiest thing in the world. The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with possibility. Zara found herself leaning slightly toward him, her heart racing. Boss, Liam's voice shattered the moment. Got a problem with the new bull? Wade stepped back, his hand falling away from her face. Coming, he called, then turned back to Zara. We should talk. Later, she nodded, not trusting her voice. Tonight, he said. After dinner. As he hurried away, Zara pressed her fingers to the spot on her cheek where he had touched her, the skin still warm from his touch. That evening, Zara took extra care with dinner, preparing Wade's favorite dishes: roast beef, fresh bread, and apple pie. She served the hands in the bunkhouse as usual, then brought Wade's meal to the dining room. This looks amazing, he said as she set down the plates. Join me. The invitation was unexpected. I've already eaten with the hands, she lied. Please, he insisted. I'd like the company. Reluctantly, she sat across from him, painfully aware of the intimacy of the setting. They ate in companionable silence for a while until Wade finally spoke. I've been thinking about what happens next, he said. Now that your mortgage is paid. As have I, she admitted. I'll need to move back to my homestead soon, he nodded slowly. That makes sense, though the men will be devastated to lose your cooking. Just the men, she asked, gathering her courage. Wade met her eyes. No, he said quietly, not just the men. The honesty in his gaze made her heart stutter. I could still cook for you sometimes, she offered, as a neighbor. Is that what you want, Zara, to be neighbors? The question hung between them, weighted with meaning. Zara took a deep breath. No, she said simply. That's not what I want. Wade set down his fork, his full attention on her face. What do you want? I want. The words caught in her throat. I'm afraid to say. He reached across the table, taking her hand in his. Don't be afraid, not with me. When Thomas died, she began slowly, I thought that was the end of certain dreams, a family, love. I accepted that my life would be different than I'd imagined. She drew a shaky breath. Then I met you and everything changed. How? He prompted gently. You saw me, she said simply. Not as a barren widow, not as someone to pity or dismiss. You saw me as a whole person with value beyond my ability to bear children. His grip on her hand tightened. Because that's who you are. Everything else is just circumstances. The town doesn't see it that way. To hell with the town, he said fiercely. They don't know you like I do. She smiled at his vehemence. And how do you know me, Wade Garrison? He stood, moving around the table until he was kneeling beside her chair. Still holding her hand, he looked up at her with an expression so tender it made her throat ache. I know you're the strongest woman I've ever met, he said. I know you're kind, even to those who don't deserve it. I know you can stitch a wound, bake bread that makes grown men cry with gratitude, and stand up to the entire town of North Platte without flinching. His voice softened further. And I know that I've fallen hopelessly in love with you. Zara's breath caught. Wade. You don't have to say anything back, he hurried to add. I just wanted you to know. Whatever you decide about the future, about your homestead, about us, I needed you to know that to me you're worth everything. Tears welled in her eyes. The town says I'm worthless, she whispered. Barren women don't have much value on the frontier. The town is wrong, he said firmly. You're worth everything to me, Zara Clayton. Everything. She reached out, touching his face with trembling fingers. I've fallen in love with you too, she admitted, the words both frightening and freeing. But I can't give you children. You think that matters to me? He asked, genuine surprise in his voice. It should, she insisted. You should have a family, sons to inherit your ranch. What I should have, he interrupted gently, is a life with the woman I love if she'll have me. The rest is details. Details, she repeated, a small laugh escaping her. Most men would consider it rather important. I'm not most men, he said simply. And you, Zara Clayton, are not most women. He rose to his feet, drawing her up with him. Standing close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body, he asked, "Will you marry me?" The question, so plainly asked, deserved an equally straightforward answer. "Yes," she said, her heart overflowing. "Yes, I will marry you." Wade's face lit with joy, and then he was kissing her, his lips gentle against hers. Zara melted into his embrace, feeling for the first time in years like she was exactly where she belonged. When they finally parted, both breathless, Wade pressed his forehead to hers. "I love you," he murmured. "More than I thought possible." "I love you too," she replied, marveling at how natural the words felt. They decided not to wait. 2 weeks later, on a perfect August morning, Zara Clayton became Zara Garrison in a simple ceremony performed by the traveling preacher who visited North Platte monthly. Rosa stood as her witness, beaming with approval while Liam stood for Wade. The town's reaction was mixed. Some, like Martha Simmons, sniffed disapprovingly at the hasty marriage and Zara's presumption in marrying one of the area's most prosperous ranchers. Others, seeing Wade's obvious devotion, revised their opinion of Zara's worth accordingly. Zara found she cared little for any of it. She and Wade combined their properties, her smaller homestead becoming part of the expanded Double G Ranch. She continued cooking for the hands, but also began spending time with Wade in his study, helping with the ranch accounts and correspondence. Her garden flourished under her continued care, and the cabin where she had briefly lived as an employee became a storehouse for her harvests. That winter, cozy in the ranch house with snow blanketing the prairie outside, Zara told Wade about a dream she'd begun to harbor. "Rosa has been teaching me more about medicinal plants," she explained as they sat before the fireplace. "Combined with what I learned from my father, I've been thinking I might offer my services to the community." "As a healer?" he asked, intrigued. "Not a doctor," she clarified. "But someone who could help with basic ailments, childbirth, injuries. North Platte has no proper doctor, and the nearest one is in Ogallala." Wade considered this, then nodded. "I think it's a wonderful idea. You have a gift for healing. Midnight's leg is proof of that." "The town might not accept me," she said, voicing her main concern. "Some won't," he agreed, "but those who need help will come eventually. Necessity overcomes prejudice." With Wade's encouragement, Zara began gathering and preparing remedies, studying her father's old medical books, and offering her services first to the ranch hands, then to neighboring homesteads. Slowly, her reputation grew, not as the barren widow but as a skilled healer. The first major test came that spring when young Mrs. Peterson, new to the area and expecting her first child, went into a difficult labor. The midwife sent for Zara in desperation, and through a long night of careful work, she helped deliver a healthy baby boy and save the exhausted mother. Word spread quickly, and gradually, even those who had been most judgmental began to seek her help. Martha Simmons herself eventually appeared at the ranch, reluctantly asking for a remedy for her husband's persistent cough. "My Herbert's tried everything else," she explained stiffly. "Dr. Miller in Ogallala said it was just age, nothing to be done." Zara prepared a mixture of wild cherry bark, honey, and other herbs. "Have him take this 3 times daily," she instructed, "and keep him away from dust as much as possible." Martha accepted the medicine with grudging thanks. 2 weeks later, she returned with a freshly baked pie. "Herbert's breathing better than he has in years," she admitted. "I thought you might. That is, I wanted to thank you properly." It wasn't an apology for years of cold judgment, but it was a beginning. As spring turned to summer, Zara found herself unusually tired, with a strange sensitivity to certain smells. Rosa, visiting one afternoon, watched her friend push away a cup of coffee with a grimace. "How long have you been feeling this way?" Rosa asked, her dark eyes thoughtful. "A few weeks," Zara admitted. "It's probably just spring fever." Rosa shook her head slowly. "I don't think so." "What do you mean? When was your last monthly time?" Rosa asked bluntly. Zara started to answer, then stopped, counting backward in her mind. "It can't be," she whispered. "The doctor said." "Doctors are not always right," Rosa said wisely, "especially about women's bodies." Hope, dangerous and fragile, bloomed in Zara's chest. "You think I might be with child?" "Yes, my friend, I think you may be." That evening, Zara shared Rosa's suspicion with Wade, her voice trembling with equal parts fear and hope. "It might not be true," she cautioned. "I don't want to disappoint you." Wade gathered her into his arms. "Zara, listen to me. I married you, not the possibility of children. If this blessing has come to us, I'll be overjoyed. If not, I'll still be the happiest man in Nebraska territory because I have you." As the weeks passed, there was no denying the truth. The woman North Platte had deemed barren and worthless was expecting a child. Wade was ecstatic, treating Zara as if she were made of the finest porcelain, despite her protests that she was perfectly capable of continuing her normal activities. The ranch hands were similarly protective, rushing to carry anything heavier than a feather if she so much as reached for it. "You've created monsters," she complained to Wade after Liam nearly tripped over himself trying to prevent her from lifting a basket of vegetables. "They love you," he replied simply. "We all do." In early December, with snow falling gently outside, Zara gave birth to a son they named William Thomas Garrison. He had Wade's eyes and Zara's auburn hair, and from his first lusty cry, he held both his parents' hearts completely. Rosa, who had assisted with the birth, placed the swaddled infant in Zara's arms. "He is strong," she observed, "like his mother." Wade, allowed into the room after the birthing was complete, approached the bed with wonder on his face. "He's perfect," he breathed, gently touching his son's tiny hand. "You're perfect." Tears slipped down Zara's cheeks. "I never thought I'd experience this," she admitted. "I'd accepted it wasn't meant for me." "The town was wrong about you," Wade said, sitting beside her on the bed. "About so many things." "Yes," she agreed, gazing down at their child. "They were." As William grew, so did Zara's practice as a healer. By the time he was walking, she had converted one room of the ranch house into a proper consulting space, with shelves of remedies and a clean examination area. People came from as far as Ogallala for her treatments, especially for women's complaints that male doctors often dismissed. The Double G Ranch prospered too, expanding under Wade and Zara's joint management. They built a larger home to accommodate their growing needs, though Wade insisted on doing much of the work himself, assisted by his loyal hands. When William was 3, Rosa moved permanently to the ranch, occupying the original cabin where Zara had first lived. "My old bones are tired of traveling," she explained, though at 60 she remained spry. "Besides, someone must teach this child about the plants that heal." In the spring of 1883, 7 years after that fateful day when Wade Garrison fixed her pasture gate, Zara gave birth to twin daughters, Emma and Elizabeth. William, now a serious-minded little boy with his father's quiet strength, appointed himself their protector from the moment he met them. One evening that summer, with the twins sleeping and William reluctantly doing the same, Wade found Zara on the porch, gazing out at the sunset painting the prairie in gold and crimson. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, sitting beside her. She smiled, leaning against his shoulder. "About how different my life is from what I imagined when Thomas died, about how close I came to losing everything. And now I have everything I never dared hope for," she said simply. "A home, children, purpose. You." Wade wrapped his arm around her, pulling her closer. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't fixed that gate?" "Sometimes," she admitted. "But I think we would have found each other somehow. Some things are just meant to be." "Like us," he said, kissing the top of her head. "Like us," she agreed, her heart full. In the distance, a coyote called, the sound floating across the darkening prairie. Inside, their children slept peacefully. And on the porch of the home they had built together, Zara and Wade Garrison watched night fall over the land that had brought them together, secure in the knowledge that love, not the judgment of others, was the true measure of a person's worth.